The cameras were already rolling when I walked out of that building. That was the first thing I noticed. Not Ade standing on the steps with her mother beside her. Not the security guard holding a box with my personal items in it. Not the small crowd of employees gathered at the entrance pretending not to watch. The cameras. 2 of them. Professional equipment, not phones. Someone had planned this. Someone had wanted this moment recorded. I stopped walking. I looked at the cameras. Then I looked at my wife. She was dressed like she was attending a press conference. Tailored navy suit, hair perfect, the particular composure of someone who has rehearsed this moment enough times that it no longer feels real to them. Just a performance to be delivered correctly. Beside her stood her mother, Mrs. Chioma Okafor, in a cream ensemble that cost more than most people's monthly salary, watching me approach with the expression of a woman who has been waiting a very long time for something and is now watching it arrive. My name is Solomon Adeyemi. I built Adeyemi Structures from a single rented office and one second-hand truck into one of the most respected construction firms in the region. 22 years. Every contract earned, every relationship built carefully, every decision made with the long-term health of the company in mind. I had done all of it. Not Ada's, not her mother. Me. Ada's extended an envelope as I reached the bottom of the steps. She said my employment with Adeyemi Structures was terminated effective immediately. She said the board had voted to appoint new executive leadership. She said the relevant legal documents were in the envelope and that my access to all company systems had been revoked as of 9 that morning. She said all of this in a clear, projected voice. For the cameras? Her mother smiled. I took the envelope. I looked at it for a moment. Then, I looked up at Ada's, my wife of 11 years, the woman I had brought into this company, given a directorship, trusted with things I had never trusted anyone else with. And I said one thing. I said, I hope you kept the receipts. Then I walked to my car. Behind me, I could hear Ada's saying something to the cameras about new leadership and a fresh vision for the company. Her mother's voice underneath, warm and congratulatory, the sound of a woman who believes she has won something. I did not look back. I got into my car. I sat for exactly 30 seconds. Then I called Amara. Amara Nwosu had been my personal assistant for 9 years. She was the most discreet, methodical, and loyal person I had ever worked with. She knew everything, not because I had told her everything, but because Amara paid attention to things that other people missed and had been paying attention for 14 months, since the day I first asked her to start watching. She picked up on the first ring. I said, they just did it, outside the building, with cameras. She said, I saw it on the live stream they posted 20 minutes ago. I said, call the board members, all 7 of them. Emergency meeting, Thursday morning. Tell them I have evidence of criminal activity within the company that requires their immediate attention. She said, already drafting the invitations. I said, and Amara, remove every member of the Okafor family from the building. Security access, system access, everything. Do it quietly, and do it now. She said, consider it done. I ended the call. I started the car. I drove home through the ordinary morning traffic of a city that had no idea what had just happened or what was about to happen next. Let me tell you about the 14 months. 14 months earlier, I had come home unexpectedly early from a site visit to find Ada Aiz on the phone in the study with the door almost but not quite closed. I was not trying to listen. I was walking past. But I heard 3 words that stopped me completely. She said, when he signs it. I stood in the corridor. I heard enough of the remaining conversation to know that whatever she was discussing involved a document that required my signature and that she was not planning to ask me for it. I said nothing that evening. I did not change my behavior or my routine. I went to bed at the usual time and woke at the usual time and went to work at the usual time. But the next morning I called Amara into my office, closed the door, and told her what I had heard. Amara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, how far do you want to go with this? I said, all the way. But quietly, nothing moves until we have everything. What we found over the following 14 months was worse than anything I had suspected that evening in the corridor. Adaez and her mother had been running money through 3 shell companies that existed only on paper, registered at addresses that turned out to be vacant lots and rented mailboxes. They had been inflating supplier invoices and splitting the difference between the real cost and the inflated figure between themselves. They had placed 6 members of the extended Okafor family on the company payroll at salaries that bore no relationship to any work being performed. And they had at some point in the preceding 8 months obtained a power of attorney document bearing my signature, a document I had never signed, and had used it to attempt to transfer ownership of my late mother's house, the house I grew up in, into a holding company controlled by Mrs. Chioma Okafor. That last one. The house. That was the one that made me feel something close to cold fury in the quiet of my office on the evening Amara placed the document in front of me. My mother had worked her entire life for that house. She had placed it in my name 3 years before she died. It was the only thing she had ever owned outright, and she had given it to me with the particular solemnity of someone transferring something sacred. They had forged my signature to take my mother's house. I sat with that information for a long time. Then I filed it carefully with everything else Amara and I had assembled, and I continued going to work and continued sitting in meetings with Adaez and continued saying good morning to her mother when she visited the office, and I continued waiting. Patience is not passivity. Patience is the decision to act at the right moment, rather than the first moment. I had learned this in 22 years of business, that the person who moves first does not always win, but the person who moves correctly almost always does. I moved correctly. He waited 14 months, not because he was weak, because he was building something they could not escape. Stay right here because the board meeting is next, and it is everything. If you're new to Whispered Confessions, subscribe right now and turn on your notifications. Hit that bell and let us finish this story. Thursday morning. 7 board members seated around the conference table in the main boardroom of Adeyemi Structures, the same boardroom where I had sat for 22 years, making decisions that built this company from nothing into something real. Adaez was not invited. Neither was her mother. Neither was the inexperienced cousin who had been installed in my chair 3 days earlier and had reportedly spent those 3 days redecorating his new office. I walked in with Amara beside me and a lawyer named Mr. Fashola who had been working quietly on this matter for 4 months. I placed a bound document in front of each board member, 37 pages, every shell company, every inflated invoice, every ghost employee, and their fabricated role and their real salary. Every transaction traced from origin to destination, documented with bank records and signed statements, and the particular irrefutable clarity of a paper trail assembled by someone who knows exactly what they are doing. And on page 31, the forged power of attorney, the attempted transfer of my mother's house, the signature that was not mine beside a notary stamp that turned out to belong to a notary who had been paid to certify a document she had never witnessed being signed. I gave the board members 20 minutes to read. The room was completely silent for those 20 minutes, except for the sound of pages turning. I watched faces. Mr. Adebayo, the longest-serving board member who had known me since the early years of the company, looked up from page 31 with an expression I will not attempt to describe. He looked at me, and then back at the document, and then at me again. When the 20 minutes were done, I stood up. I told them that the public announcement made 3 days earlier on the steps of this building was not a legitimate board action. I told them no proper vote had been called, no quorum had been established, and no correct procedure had been followed. I told them that the announcement had been a performance staged for cameras, and that the actual legal authority over this company remained exactly where it had always been. Then I told them what I wanted. A formal vote, conducted correctly. On the record. The vote took 4 minutes. 7 members, 7 votes. Unanimous. Adaez's CEO appointment was invalidated. Every member of the Okafor family currently drawing a salary from Adeyemi Structures was to be terminated immediately with cause. The matter of the forged power of attorney and the shell company transactions was to be referred to law enforcement, and Solomon Adeyemi was to be reinstated as chairman and majority owner of the company he had built, with full authority restored. Mr. Adebayo seconded every motion personally. I did not watch Adeyes receive the news. I did not need to. Amara called me that evening to tell me that she had delivered the formal board resolution to Adeyes' lawyer, and that the response had involved a great deal of noise and very little substance. There was talk of contesting the vote. There was talk of counter-legal action. There was the particular bluster of people who have been caught completely and are hoping that volume can substitute for position. It could not. Mrs. Chioma Okafor called me directly that same evening. I let it ring. She called twice more. I let both of those ring as well. She had nothing to say to me that required a response, and I had nothing to say to her at all. The legal process that followed was handled entirely by Mr. Fashola and his team. I went to work. I sat in my chair, my actual chair, in my actual office, behind the desk where I had made 22 years of decisions, and I ran my company. I restructured 3 departments that had been quietly mismanaged during the period of distraction. I gave salary increases to 11 employees who had been overlooked for years, while ghost salaries were being paid to people who did not exist. I promoted 2 project managers who deserved it, and had been passed over in favor of Okafor family members with no relevant qualifications. I called my son Kalade. He was 13. He lived with me every other week under the custody arrangement and spent the remaining time with Adeyes at a property she was renting since vacating the family home, the home she had also attempted to transfer out of my ownership and which remained, thanks to the legal work Amara and I had done, entirely in my name. I took Kolade to see my mother's house on a Saturday morning. We stood in front of it on the pavement, and I told him about his grandmother, about the work she had done for 30 years to own this house outright, about what she had told me the day she transferred it to my name, about why some things are worth protecting regardless of what it costs to protect them. Kolade was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then he asked if we could go inside. We went inside. We sat in the living room where my mother had sat every evening for 30 years. It smelled the same as it had always smelled, a particular combination of old wood and something I had never been able to name that was simply the smell of that house and no other. I had protected it. That was enough. People have asked me since then how I stayed calm through 14 months of knowing what I knew and saying nothing. How I sat in meetings with Adeyes and went home to her and continued functioning normally, while everything I knew about what she was doing sat inside me like a weight. The answer is simpler than people expect. I had something to protect. The company. My son's inheritance. My mother's house. The 22 years of work that had built something real from nothing. When you know what you are protecting, you do not need anger to sustain you. Anger is fuel for people who have no direction. I had a direction. I had a plan. And I had Amara, methodical and loyal, building the case that would make the plan work. Adeyes had wanted a public humiliation, cameras on the courthouse steps, my box of personal items, her mother's smile, the performance of a powerful woman removing a man from the throne he had built. What she got instead was a board vote, 7-0, on the record, permanent. The camera she brought to the courthouse steps recorded her finest moment. The boardroom recorded mine. There was no comparison. Some people fight loudly because they believe noise is power. I have always known that the quietest person in the room is usually the one who has already decided how everything ends. I had decided 14 months earlier. Everything after that was simply the execution of a plan. 7 votes, unanimous. He built it, he protected it, he took it back, and he did it all without raising his voice once. If this story hit different today, drop a comment below. Share this video with someone who needs to see what patience and preparation can do. Subscribe to Whispered Confessions right now because next week we have something that will absolutely floor you. I will see you then.